Welcome back, folks, to another episode of this podcast. We're here to have a good time. Over the next half hour, we are previewing National Signing Day. We are talking about Wisconsin's new offensive coordinator, and then we're going to be talking about some college basketball to close out the show, as usual. Guys, it is an exciting time for college football recruiting, with Wednesday being National Signing Day, and these final few recruits signing their national letters of intent and choosing where they're going for school. And then we start this all over again with the 2023 cycle. But I wanted to go over 5 guys you're going to want to keep an eye on going into National Signing Day this week and when they are committing. And we're going to talk about a guy we already talked about before. Originally, he was verbally committed to Texas A&M, but he has since decommitted. And that is Harold Perkins, the 8th overall 5-star linebacker. Crystal ball to Texas A&M, but many believe it's down to Florida and LSU, because why would he decommit just weeks before signing day to recommit back to the same school? And I kind of see where they're coming from. He's from the New Orleans area before moving to Texas. Florida has done a great job. That was one of the schools he wanted to really put pressure on his recruiting. And Brian Kelly is doing some interesting things down recruiting and doing a good job with it. Granted, he has not coached a spring game yet, nor has he coached a regular season game yet. But what he's doing is some positive notes, and I talked about that in a video earlier this week. Perkins will be making his decision at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, so keep an eye out on that. The next guy I want to talk about is Shamar Stewart, the 10th overall 5-star defensive lineman. He's also crystal ball to Texas A&M, but Miami is neck and neck with him. He just took an official visit there this past weekend, hung out with Shaquille O'Neal at his restaurant, had a great time, and he plans to commit at 1:30 on Wednesday. So keeping an eye on that commitment. That could be a huge get for Mario Cristobal if he's able to take him away from Texas A&M. Third guy, Devon Campbell, 10th overall player, 5-star interior offensive lineman. We talked about this a few weeks ago. He's between Texas and Oklahoma, crystal ball to Texas, and it is believed he is probably going to end up in Texas when this is all said and done, as Steve Sark is really building up that offensive line for Texas this year through this recruiting process, or through this recruiting cycle. He will be committing at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, one of the later commitments in the day, so keep an eye out on that. Jacoby Matthews, 36th overall, 4-star safety out of Louisiana, would be a huge get for LSU if they are able to land him. They are believed to be the favorites as well, but Florida and Texas A&M are still in contention for his talents. He is scheduled to commit at noon on Wednesday. And then to close it out, a guy I did a video on a few weeks ago. He's one of the fastest rising guys in this cycle, Andrew Paul. He's the 529th ranked nationally player in this recruiting class, 3-star running back. Now, I know what you're saying. Why are we talking about a 3-star running back? Why are we talking about the 529th player overall? There's so many guys in front of him that have not committed themselves. Well, Paul has been the rise climber. Originally, when I did the video on him just 2 weeks ago, he was ranked as a 1,200th player nationally, and he's already jumped up to 529th. It's only going to go up from there. He is a late bloomer. He was a starter and a pretty good running back for so long throughout his high school career. But when the Missouri running back coach gave him confidence, he ended up breaking out and having a fantastic season, rushing for, I want to say, over 2,000 yards this year, which is an impressive senior season. He is crystal ball to Georgia, but Clemson is also viewed to be in the mix, and it's probably going to come down to those two from what I was able to find. Like I said, one of the fastest rising guys in the cycle. Check out my video if you want a deeper dive into his story. And he will commit on Wednesday at 12:20 p.m., one of the earlier commitments that day. Now, so those are the 5 guys I wanted to preview going into National Signing Day. For more information on these guys, if you guys want to see more of this stuff, let me know in the comments section below. But moving over, Wisconsin's got a new offensive coordinator in Bobby Ingram. He is the former tight ends coach for the Baltimore Ravens. His son, Dean, is coming off his sophomore season with the Badgers, seeing action in 5 games, playing cornerback and having 20 tackles with an interception. Bobby played with the Chicago Bears, Seattle Seahawks, Kansas City Chiefs during his NFL career from 1996 to 2009, catching 650 passes for 7,751 yards and 35 touchdowns. He worked with Paul Chryst as the wide receiver coach at Pittsburgh in 2012 and 2013. And one of his former players, he originally with the Baltimore Ravens, he was a wide receivers coach for them and coached up Steve Smith Sr. during his final year in the NFL. And Smith spoke on him saying, Bobby Ingram used to be my wide receiver coach down there, and he moved to tight ends. What's the best part of that team right now? The tight ends. So Ingram, a very impressive hire, brings in a smart-minded offensive coordinator. Andrew, what's your opinion on him as the new Wisconsin coordinator?
It's always hard to know exactly how someone is going to translate between the NFL and the college world going in either direction. But no matter what, Mark Andrews did not go into this season as a top 3 tight end, and coming out, in the playoff, now that we've gone through the playoffs pretty much, we can see that he has been a top 3 tight end in the league. So any coach that is able to help elevate players like that, in theory, can do it both ways in both games. So it should be something that Badger fans are excited to see, but he will be under a lot of scrutiny these first few years as the Badgers have seen their offense struggle while their defense thrives.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether Chryst lets Bobby get full reign of the offense and how he is able to work back and forth. Once Rudolph left for Virginia, there were a lot of questions of whether Chryst was going to bring in someone he didn't have experience with, or if he was going to bring in a trusted advisor. He brought in someone he's worked with in the past, who speaks very highly of Chryst as well. And he is linked to Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams' father and Bobby are close friends, and Dean and Caleb played together in high school. That's not the reason this guy was hired, but just a key fact, as at the time of recording, Caleb Williams has not announced his decision. So just another one of those things that adds to the Wisconsin side of everything. Badger fans, don't get your hopes up, though.
There were a lot at the basketball games. There was even chance asking for Caleb Williams to come. So a lot of them are already writing it off as dones, but there's a lot yet to be determined in his journey.
Yeah, it's that side is a whole topic for another day. We'll talk more about Williams once he actually chooses where he's going to go as this process drags on. Ingram, though, has worked with a quarterback in Lamar Jackson. We'll probably hope to get a little more mobility from the quarterback in their offense and help modernize the Badger offense while holding on to that pro style side of it as well. I really like the hire. From what I was reading, Penn State fans really wanted to hire him to their staff throughout the time over the past few years. So for the Badgers to land someone as highly regarded as Bobby Ingram is an exciting thing for Badger fans, and hopefully will change the offense going forward, as it has struggled and it's been painful to watch. Like you said, the defense has been stout. We had arguably the best defense last year, if not one of the top 2, depending on how you view Badgers defense versus Georgia. Georgia did win the national title, but statistically the Badgers were right there with Georgia, and those 2 schools were on their own level. Now imagine if the Badgers could put together an offense along with that stout defense. Jim Leonard's most likely returning. I know he's probably going to interview for some NFL jobs, but he seems like he wants to bring a national title to Wisconsin before he ever considers leaving. And Paul Chryst also had a year added onto his contract, so he got extended as well. It's going to be a very interesting season for the Badgers, especially with Mertz. Will Mertz be able to take the jump with Bobby coaching him up? One of the things was last year, Mertz took a step back, and Paul Chryst was not only serving as the offensive coordinator, he was the head coach, and he was coaching up the quarterbacks. And that's one of the reasons he took Mertz might have taken a step back, is Chryst was just doing way too much and not being able to focus on really working with the quarterbacks. So having an offensive coordinator who probably should be calling the plays, taking that off Chris Plate could help the Badger offense as well going forward. Andrew, do you have any other thoughts to share on this topic?
I think you wrapped it up pretty well. It'll definitely be interesting to see how the Badgers move forward.
So moving over to college basketball, Andrew, you wanted to talk about the Xavier Creighton game that really caught your attention?
That was the best thing I've seen this week. And there were a lot of great games this week. However, that run by Xavier was insane. Just to give you all some context, Creighton had a large lead on Xavier at halftime, winning 36-19. There was a lot of contribution from Arthur Kaluma and Ryan Nemhard, who had 8 and 9 respectively in the first half for Creighton. I expected Creighton to have ran away with this game, especially being at home. But then checking the game partway through the second half, Xavier had opened up with 18 unanswered points. They finished a massive run that concluded with 27-4 over the first 11 minutes of the second half. That is just an insane run for any team to have 18 unanswered and 27, not only to score 27 points in 11 minutes, but to also hold your opponent to only 4. Typically, when you see games that are going that quickly, you see both teams scoring that way. It just wasn't that way. Xavier had a complete dominance over Creighton in the second half of that game to lead them to a victory. The big players of the game for Xavier were Nate Johnson, Jack Nungy, Zach Fremantle, and Paul Scruggs, who all had 15 or more points while only having played 8 total players for the Musketeers in that game.
That's something where halftime adjustments are extremely important, no matter where you are in the game. You said you turned that game off at one point, right?
Yeah, I had already kind of written it up as Creighton won this game and there were better games to watch at that point. So what was the purpose to continuing to look at it?
One of those things where it's not over until the clock hits 0. And
it does pay off to bring out energy in the start of the second half. You know, as cliche as it is, the team with the most energy to start the second half typically wins it.
That's something where Creighton's going to have to go back to the drawing board and really figure out how they don't let something like this happen again. And it's one of those things where you look at, come the end of the season, a turning point for a team sometimes, where it either wakes them up and gets them going on a massive run themselves, or the team curls up and kind of ends it for themselves and could be an issue. Moving over to the SEC Big 12 Challenge. You have something to admit, Andrew?
You know, I don't know if I would say the SEC is better, but they did do everything they could to prove me wrong this week about the Big 12 being the best conference in the nation. And I can no longer say that the Big 12 is without a doubt the best conference in the nation. The SEC won the challenge 6-4. When I looked at the games, if I were to have been predicting the games, I would have thought that the Big 12 would have taken it 7-3, and it was a complete role reversal there. Just to run through some of the things that happened today. It started out with a huge win from TCU, who upset LSU in Fort Worth, 77-68. That gave the Big 12 a 1-0 lead to start. The best players from that game were Mike Miles and Chuck O'Bannon. Chuck O'Bannon shot, a bit better percentage from the field. They both had 19 points. So my player of the game for that game would be Chuck O'Bannon. The SEC was able to even it right back up where Arkansas continues to roll and arguably might have kind of put down West Virginia's hopes of getting into the tournament, or at least getting a decent seed, as Arkansas beat West Virginia by the exact same score in Fayetteville. The player of the game there would be Au'Diese Toney with 19 points. Arkansas just kind of handled business. Auburn has now finally proved to me that they are the number 1 team in America. They pulled away at the 10-minute mark in the second half of that game to beat an Oklahoma team that I think is underrated, 86-68, to give the SEC a 2-1 lead. Jabari Smith had a 23-point game. He's a top-level freshman. He's going to be a top 2 pick in the draft, and I doubt he'll be picked second. Iowa State is able to even it back up then right after with a win against a bad Missouri team in Ames. Final of that game was 67-50. And the player of the game was Isaiah Brockington, Iowa State's leading scorer for most of the year with 15 points. Then in one of the more surprising games for me this year, or within this challenge, Ole Miss found a way to defeat Kansas State in Oxford, Mississippi by a score of 67-56, giving the SEC another 2-3 lead. This is shocking to me because I see the Big 12's bottom as being significantly higher. I think that Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and TCU, or at least what was projected to be the bottom, that would be, are significantly better than the Ole Misses, Missouris, Georgias, South Carolinas of the SEC. And this game right here is going to make me think about that going forward. Their player of the game was Deshaun Ruffin with 17 points. A little bit of a heartbreaker for me personally, but Oklahoma State blew a 16-point lead at Florida without Florida's leading scorer, Colin Castleton even. And the player of the game there was Tyree Appleby having to take charge without the interior presence of Castleton. Alabama proves to be even more confusing of a team, you know, being able to upset Baylor, arguably in Tuscaloosa, 87-78. That seals the SEC to have at the worst a tie in this challenge. And Bama could legitimately be a Final Four team in March, or I could easily see them losing in the round of 64. Joe Lunardi currently has them as a 5 seed, and everybody knows that 5 seeds are bound to get upset by 12 seeds. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that Alabama makes it to the Final Four or loses in the first round. Good luck to everybody picking those brackets. The player of the game there, though, was Javon Quinterly, and he finally is starting to get going again. There's been a lot of play with him in the starting lineup, out of the starting lineup. I think that if Alabama's going to be a winning team, they need him to be in the starting lineup alongside Jaden Shackelford. Then another shocking game, not to everybody, but another shocking game was Kentucky, who sealed the deal for the SEC by marching into Lawrence, Kansas, and just dominating the Jayhawks from tip to final buzzer. The final score was 80-62, and it was a huge, huge win for the Wildcats, who were lacking a defining victory on the season. They had some okay moments, but they just didn't beat any of those top-level talented teams like you're used to seeing them do. They lost to Duke. They lost at Notre Dame, sprinkling a few more losses just without great chances to win big games. They lost at Auburn without Ty Washington for most of the game. But, you know, a win like this is really going to help a team like Kentucky, especially with momentum and confidence. Player of the game was Keon Brooks Jr., who put up a career night with 27 points. The Big 12 didn't back down, even though they had lost the challenge. Texas Tech pushed back with a nice win over a streaky Mississippi State team in Lubbock. They proved that they can win games without Terrence Shannon Jr. again, but it didn't really mean much in terms of the challenge. It was a 76-50 win. The leading scorer for Tech was Adonis Arms with 16. And then to finish the night out, like Kentucky, Texas picked up a huge resume building win, who hadn't had a big win, by beating Tennessee in Austin 52-51. This was a pretty dramatic ending as Texas was leading by a lot going into the late parts of the game. There were only about 6 minutes left on the clock when Tennessee came back to tie it up with only a few seconds left, but Texas was finally able to pull it out. They're still very mortal, though, as players are not consistently scoring big or small in any specific game, as the leading scorer of this game was Courtney Ramey with 18 points and not too many other guys breaking 10 points per game for the Longhorns. So the SEC really did their work and their resume work this past weekend by absolutely just taking it to the Big 12.
If there is a team from this challenge that you look at and either positively or negatively affects their season going forward, which team really hit you the most of having that game, that season changing moment?
I think there are two of them that have that. I think Arkansas had a really, really big positive moment. I know that I mentioned big resumes for Kentucky and Texas, but Arkansas is a team that saw some early struggles in SEC play, but they have finally got it back on the game again. They have 5 or 6 wins in a row now, and I think that's a big win to beat a good West Virginia team coached by a legendary coach, Bob Huggins, to roll into the rest of SEC play. And I think that this is also a very detrimental loss to Kansas State, absolutely hurting a lot of their tournament hopes. Just being in the Big 12, they were going to get beat up a bit, and that could hurt their resume. But then to also tack on an extra loss against a bad Ole Miss team isn't going to help them.
So let's move on to your top 25.
Alrighty, so I'm just going to run through this. To start off, as I mentioned, Auburn is finally my number one. That win against Oklahoma was all I needed. That was the game where they beat a team that was that good to put them number one. I know that they beat Kentucky before, but they also were a little bit banged up. It was a really good home atmosphere, so I just wanted to see a little bit more. They're there now. 2 through 8, UCLA, Gonzaga, Arizona, Duke, Michigan State, Texas Tech, Kentucky. They're all just kind of, they moved up or down based off of who they beat, pretty simplistic stuff. Number 9, Kansas. The only note about this is that they fell below TTU, even though they won, just because of how much the Wildcats blew out Kansas. So, I mean, you can interchange my 7, 8, 9 in any way, shape, or form you want, but those are where they kind of fall for me at this moment. 10 through 19 is Wisconsin, Purdue, Providence, Houston, Villanova, Ohio State, Baylor, Boise State, Illinois, and UConn. Most of those guys just kind of held their own this week. There was some impressive games between Purdue and Ohio State, and Baylor fell quite a bit due to their loss at Alabama, but not too much else here to say. TCU got back into my rankings, and it shows how easy it is for the Big 12 to cannibalize itself, because they lost to Oklahoma State and got knocked out of my rankings just for them to beat a very good LSU team and get jumped back in. So, you're going to see a lot of movement down here. Rounding it out, we have LSU, Marquette, Xavier, Arkansas, and Texas. The last 2 teams, Arkansas and Texas, neither of them are really definitively in the top 25 per se right now. They're both on thin ice. It's just kind of, they're hot right now to some extent. At least for Arkansas is hot. Texas only made it in because they beat Tennessee, because I was planning on putting Tennessee in it, but it was hard for me to put them in over Texas after that 1-point loss in Austin. And then the only real big thing to note about the top 25 right now is that there's going to be a lot of parity. As you can see with how much over these past few weeks I've been throwing teams in those bottom 5 spots and pulling them out. There's going to be a lot of movement in March, and it isn't necessarily like one of those years where you can expect, I can just Sharpie and Gonzaga and Baylor into my Final Four. You don't know where teams are going to go. You don't know who's going to win, and you don't know when they're going to lose. So it's just something you have to be wary of, and there's going to be a lot of fun this March.
Before we fully close this out, I didn't originally want to talk about it, but as the episode went on, I kind of wanted to talk about it, and this is going to be kind of a out of nowhere thing for you, Andrew. The USFL announced their coaches last week. On the north side of it, you have on the south side of it, you have Skip Holtz with the Birmingham Stallions, Kevin Sumlin with the Houston Gamblers, Todd Haley with the Tampa Bay Bandits, and New Orleans Breakers with Larry Fedora. On the north side of it, you have Mike Riley for my New Jersey Generals. Yep, that's the team I'm running with. Proud Jerseyan right here. Bart Andrus will be the general manager and head coach for the Philadelphia Stars. Kirby Wilson will get his first head coaching experience with the Pittsburgh Maulers. And Jeff Fisher returns to football and will be the head coach of the Michigan Panthers. Guys, I don't know about you, but I am so excited for the USFL. It's something I've been looking forward to. It was sad to see the XFL not really get their shot because of the events of 2020. The AAF had bad decision making, which really ended their league. The USFL back in the 70s and 80s was actually pretty successful, and until some people decided it was better to play in the fall and really try to compete against the NFL. And that was really the demise of the USFL back then. There's a great ESPN documentary about the rise and fall of the USFL that I definitely recommend. I might go back and rewatch it myself. And it's something that April 16th can't come quick enough. I mean, we're coming to the end of the NFL season, and I already am getting sad that there's not going to be any football on TV for about 2 months. Andrew, how do you feel about the USFL?
Never heard of it. So sorry. I think it's pretty clear that I'm not as big into football as I am some other sports. So I just never, as you said, it wasn't really around for my time, being late 90s, early 2000s. So it was trying too hard to compete with the NFL. So there's no way that I would have really been able to see it or get my eyes on it.
70s and 80s, not 90s and 2000s.
Well, that's my point. Like it was beyond my time.
I wasn't even here for that, kids.
Yeah.
And then one last story to end this up. More opinion sharing. Is Tom Brady retiring?
Yeah, this is not going to help any of the him going out on a year where he didn't win the Super Bowl is not going to help any of the arguments of is he the best of all time or not. It's, if anything, I think those conversations are going to be going on for the next year plus. And after a lot of like the moves that like Brett Favre or Rob Gronkowski did, I'm certain there'll be a lot of talks over the next year of like, oh, I think he's going to come back, unretire and move somewhere else. So it'll be a lot of interesting stuff to see how everything fully develops.
So as of now, as of the time of recording, Brady apparently told the GM this weekend that he has not come to a decision on whether he was retiring or not, and that it was false information shared that he retired. I think as much as I rooted against Brady when he was with the Patriots throughout his career, I think there really isn't an argument. I think he is the greatest of all time when it comes to the quarterback position at the NFL. I mean, what the guy has been able to do throughout his career, although he's gotten some luck in his directions, has just been impressive. I think the jokes that are going around is, well, he was going to retire, and now that there were reports that jumped on it and might have been false, it's going to give him motivation to come back one more year and win the Super Bowl. And that would not surprise me at all if that is what happens. But I don't also see him going out on a year with the way they lost in the divisional round of the playoffs. But a little bit of a quicker episode today. That's our show. Guys, let us know what you want us to talk about more or less in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not done already, please subscribe to this channel. Turn on that bell notification. This is coming out every Tuesday morning. I'm having a blast doing it. Andrew's having a blast doing it. I am so thankful. We just hit 5,000 subscribers yesterday. Never thought that was going to happen. So that's an amazing goal. And I couldn't have done any of this without you guys. You guys mean the world to me. Thank you so much. Love you guys. Have a great day. And as always, remember to embrace the grind.